Hey guys, Miss Warren here. I am talking today about our surrealist landscape drawing. So in class this week, my students are planning out a surrealist drawing, and they have to have a foreground, a midground, and a background with main objects close to 1/3 of the way into the paper. Now, I'm not showing you my whole paper. I'm just kind of zoomed in on one part because I was going to demonstrate some coloring techniques. Now, since we're working larger, I'm going to show y'all a little bit of shortcut because we're going to be primarily coloring in with colored pencils. But if you have a large open area like the sky up here, and you don't want to be coloring forever with colored pencils, chalk pastels are a little bit faster. Now, you can't really get good detail with chalk pastels because they're pretty messy. And they're pretty smudgy too. So we're going to use them just for large areas of color. Now, I also don't want to put it anywhere that I could, here, I'm going to scooch over just a little bit, anywhere that I want to keep a light color or detailed parts. So this creature that I drew in the middle here, I'm not going to be coloring him in with chalk pastel. The moon that I want to stay white, I'm not going to be coloring it with chalk pastel. But I have a pretty big strip of sky up here. I have a pretty big strip of earth and background right here and below the creature. So I am going to take a chalk pastel, and now you can put it directly on the paper, but you have to be very careful not to make it streaky. I'm also, when you're drawing a sky, if like the moon or the sun is high up in the sky, the top of the sky is going to be lighter and the horizon is going to be a little bit darker. If the sun is setting, it's going to be reversed. So I have my moon up here in the sky, so the horizon line is going to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to go along my horizon line, and I'm going to put a little bit of this blue chalk directly on there using the side and not like the corner, because I want this to be pretty smooth. Now I have some branches that are going to overlap this, but the branches are going to be brown, so they're going to be a little bit darker than this blue. And I'm going to add a little bit less as I go up, kind of fade out. Now, you can use a blending stump, or you could use your finger, or you can use a paper towel wrapped around your finger to kind of blend this into the paper. Do you see all those little white specks on the paper, the texture of the paper? That's called the tooth of the paper. And what I'm doing is I'm working the pigment, that is the color, into the tooth of the paper. I am going to go over this with colored pencil, but I want to work this, you see, rubbing this in is going to be easier than coloring every little inch. See how much more quickly this covers the area than just colored pencil would. So that's the idea, is that we're doing a base coat that's quicker and works the pigment or the color. Now I don't want to get it inside my moon, but I'm going to add a little more color to this horizon line here. And I'm kind of going around the branches, even though I'll color them in brown, and it doesn't matter if a little gets on where the branches will be. Now, see, I'm getting it on my hand, so you have to be careful where you touch your paper. This is pretty messy, but this makes for a quicker fill. You can kind of go in little circles to kind of rub it into that tooth of the paper. Make sure all the little white specks get filled up. Now, if you had clouds in the sky, you definitely would want to go around the clouds like I'm going around the moon here. And when you rub it into your paper, you want to be pretty consistent with your direction. I'm not suddenly going up and down. I might kind of do little round directions, but I'm not all of a sudden going up and down. Get a little across the top here. Now I have some mountains in the background. I'm gonna get them with a little bit of gray. blend it into that paper. I'm just doing a kind of light coat because I'm going to go back in with the colored pencils and do all the detailed shading. I have some green down in the forest here, like I want a little bit of forest behind this guy. So I'm going to just put a little bit of green and I'm going to kind of scrumble it and make some texture. I think I want to do kind of a fall scene, so I might do a few dots of orange too. And I'm kind of going in between my branches here that I have on my tree in my foreground. And I definitely don't want to get any on him because I'm going to do him in colored pencil. I'm going to put a few flecks of orange. If you can tell, my oil pastels are dirty. I had to wipe this side off with a paper towel first because the last person to use the, not oil pastels, chalk pastels, put them all in the same bag. And when they the dust and the powder comes off of them, and they rub against each other, they put this brown coat of dust on the surface. But that's okay. If it gets a little brown on it, at least for me, because I want a fall scene, so it's okay if there's a little bit of brown in there. And I'm gonna kind of mix this color. Now, if you wanted these colors to stay really bright, you would switch paper towels. But since I want this to be a kind of nighttime scene, I am not switching. So I highly recommend, if you want to keep bright colors, that you clean paper towels in between. Make sure your individual chalk pastels are super clean. Now we have a kind of base coat on there. Now I'm going to grab some colored pencils. I think I have some right here. And I'm going to start coloring in the details. So I do have a base coat down, but that's not quite enough. I want to get a little more detailed and a little more controlled. Get some black and white for some shading. Get a little bit of blue and violet. And maybe a little bit of yellow, green, orange, and brown. Okay. So my character here, he's going to be outlined in brown, and I'll kind of come back and give him some more detail, but just kind of getting the outline shape there so I know what not to color into. And I'm going to get the branches of this tree that I drew earlier. And you see how the colored pencil goes over the top. You can still see it even though we colored it with the chalk. And we did it just kind of a light layer with the chalk. We'll come back in and I'll make this darker. I'm just kind of marking out where it will go. Now the mountains in the background, remember how we talked about shading? If the moon is here, the opposite side is going to be darker. So I'm going to outline my mountains a little bit better so you can see them a little more clearly in the background. I'm going to make that dividing line and the cracks. And I'm going to shade in on top of the chalk pastel. This way, I don't want it to be streaky. I'm being careful to kind of blend it in really well. This one would have a dividing line, but it's behind the tree. So over on this side, I'm going to add some shadow. Same thing here. Add some shadow here. And some shadow here. You see how that kind of sharpens it up? I did like the base coat with the chalk pastel, and now I'm going through and sharpening it up. Now, if I don't want to get any darker, but I want to blend it together a little bit better, I'm going to take a white. I'm going to blend that white into the paper. I'm going to work those colors more into the paper. This kind of sets the chalk pastel and keeps it from being so smudgy too, because there's wax in the colored pencil that will kind of seal the chalk pastel into place. Another thing you can do for chalk pastel if you don't want it to smudge or smear after you put it down is you can put a little bit of hairspray on it, or something called fixative. But normally I just use a little bit of hairspray because it does the same thing and it doesn't cost quite as much as art fixative. Blend this color a little bit more. I don't want all these streaky lines in here, so I'm trying to smooth it out. Yeah, that still looks pretty streaky. I think I might put a little bit of blue in my mountains because they're supposed to be off in the distance and getting a little bit of that sky color. So I'm going to blend a little bit of that into the mountains. Get a little bit of blue shading in there. And I'm gonna go along the horizon line and I'm gonna blend in a little bit of colored pencil into the sky. I just don't have to press as hard or worry as much about it because I put that layer of chalk pastel down. But I'm still gonna go over it with a little bit of colored pencil where I want it to be darker. And I'm gonna blend in a little bit of white where I want it to be lighter. So the only real purpose of the chalk pastel is to kind of speed up the process so we don't have to press so hard. Now I'm still going to blend in, let me get the white. I'm gonna blend in the chalk pastel into the paper with some white, just kind of going over the whole thing, really pressing on there. And my moon has enough detail to where I'm going to not use chalk pastel on the moon. I'm going to still do the moon in colored pencil. I'm going to outline it with a little bit of black. I'm going to draw the craters on it with a little bit of black, very lightly, because I'm going to blend this with white so I get that kind of gray effect. The hills and valleys and mountains on the moon too. And then I'm going to blend it out with some white. I'm going to go a little outside the moon shape with the white to kind of give it a glow. There we have the moon in the corner. I'm gonna build up a little bit of shade on the trees here so you can see how that covers up. I want at least 2 shades of brown going on here. So I'm gonna get the darker brown and I'm gonna go on the side that's away from the moon. And I'm gonna kind of shade that edge on the opposite side of the moon. On each of the branches. I think I'm gonna let this branch overlap the moon some, but get skinnier. Go in with my medium brown and I'm going to color the whole area of the tree in. Maybe leaving a little bit of the edge that's facing the moon, and I'm going to add some white for some shading. Maybe I should have gone around this tree a little bit more, but that's fine. Especially if it's a nighttime scene, it's fine if the colors get a little bit of blue on them. But if you don't want any tint of the sky on the colors of what you're drawing, you need to skip it when you're putting that chalk pastel in the back, or else it will have a little bit of a blue tint to it. Here, I'm gonna get some white, and I'm gonna color in just a little bit of white on the side that's facing the moon. Oh, I just dropped a paper off the edge of the table. That's okay though, I'll get it later. I want it lighter on the side that's facing the moon and darker on the side that's away from it. Now these are Crayola colored pencils, which are pretty good, but if you had like a Prismacolor, they have more pigment in them and they would really cover up anything you drew over. Now I'm gonna do a few little small branches coming off here. See how I'm kind of like wiggling? Now if I wanted to do a big branch, I could do like this, and then I'm gonna kind of wiggle the end of my pencil to kind of get it all like small and branchy. And I'm doing this with my darker color. And I'm going to shade the side that's away from the moon. Put some of the mid-tone on there. And really build up that color. Now, if you want your tree colors or whatever in the foreground, like I said, like I skipped over this guy and I didn't get any of the chalk pastel inside of him, you need to make sure to do that. Here, I'm gonna put a few more branches coming out over here, crossing over these. Letting some go off the edge of the page up here. Now for this area in the background where I did just a little bit of chalk pastel for like these leaves, I'm gonna go back through and I'm gonna just work a little bit of texture into there. It's because these trees are so far away, you're not gonna be able to see the individual leaves. It's just kind of like an area full of texture. And I'm gonna kind of go around the parts that have more color versus the part that have less color. And I'm gonna work some orange and yellow into there because I kind of want it to be starting to become fall. I'm gonna work a little bit of color in there. And it's okay if these trees in the background are a little bit faded or a little bit dark because they're farther away, so they're gonna be less pigmented, have less color to them. Color in between. Get a little bit of orange in some of these areas because I want it to be almost fall. I need a little bit of the gray from the mountains. I'm gonna go back with a little chalk pastel on my finger. I'm gonna rub it on there to kind of fade it out, make it look like it's really far away. I recommend practicing the chalk pastel on your sketch before diving into your final. Really kind of get the hang of that before you just dive right in on your final. So go ahead and give that a try, and I look forward to seeing your work.